It is. I
It is.
mean,
Grad
it
school's
is.
not cheap.
Sorry?
Grad school's not cheap.
No, grad school's not cheap. Undergrad's not cheap. And I think about my own experience where, I come from a very privileged background. Both parents are college educated. We're middle to upper middle class. And so my parents paid for my whole undergrad education, which was incredible. I had no
That's
debt
awesome.
coming out of undergrad, which is unusual.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed me to be able to pursue a master's degree. And, they kind of let me know, like, hey, this one's on you, which
Mm-hmm.
felt fair. And so I got some student loans and, started the master's degree, which all told cost me about $50,000 just in tuition, not in life expenses or anything like that. And there were many times throughout my degree where the workload was so intense that I wasn't able to work as much. And I really had to rely on that safety net of my parents to back me up with, helping me out with some extra money, paying some of my bills, things like that. And then even now, my parents still help me out quite a bit. I have big student loan payments. We have to pay for supervision. I think that's something that a lot of people don't know is that when you're starting out as a therapist and you're in that kind of internship phase before you're fully licensed, you have to meet with a supervisor every week and you have to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
And some supervisors charge like $150, $200 a session. So you're looking at, $600 to $800 a month to be able to do your job. And so there are all these incredible expenses that come along with becoming a therapist. And, like anything, if it costs a lot of money, then it excludes certain people. It excludes people that can't pay for it. It excludes people that don't have the safety net of, either parents or grandparents or a community to provide them with the money that they need to achieve these goals. And so, we talk a lot about inclusion in terms of the therapy clients, right? And how do we see more clients, who aren't just white women, which is the group that is most likely to come to therapy? How do we see Black clients and Latinx clients and Asian American clients, and how do we see clients from many different groups? And I think part of it is we have to create a more diverse crowd of actual therapists, because for many people, it can be hard to sit in a room with someone who you don't feel like you have anything in common with.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're sitting across from someone who does not share the same life experiences as you, does not share the same skin color as you, does not come from the same socioeconomic background as you, that's not to say that they can't be a competent therapist and that you couldn't have a good experience with them, but it might be really hard to get in the room in the first place, and
Right.
there might be some work that doesn't get done because they don't have that cultural understanding. And so, counselors, I think, do and should work to be culturally competent, right? I mean, we should learn about all the different populations of people that we could potentially serve. But the reality of it is that it sometimes is easier to talk to somebody like you. And I think that with therapy or with, becoming a therapist being such an expensive endeavor and requiring things like unpaid internships, which I think are terrible.
Whoa, they do that in your state?
Oh, yeah.
Wait, you have an unpaid internship and you pay for supervision?
Yeah. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. No, I mean, like, not just like in general, like totally unpaid internships that, essentially only allow people who are in elite
Oh, I
spaces
see what you're
to really
saying. Yeah,
access
yeah,
experience.
across the broader swath of society, not just not in our field. I don't know
Yes,
anybody who
yes.
does an unpaid internship in our field. That would be horrific.
Yeah, it'd be really hard. Although, I mean, sometimes, you do have to work in spaces that are either unpaid or paid very low, because that's what's available to people in internship positions and
Right.
with LPC intern licenses and stuff. So, I mean, basically, all that to say, I think that, we, by having all of these requirements and not helping people to be able to afford therapy, be able to afford grad school, be able to afford to be in these internships, I think we automatically exclude a really broad swath of the population. And I think that the field suffers because of it, because we're missing out on a lot of probably really brilliant, wonderful people who have great insight and who could make the therapy community more welcoming for other sets of clients.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's another barrier also, in addition to economics, and then of course those economics tend, as we typically know, to break along racial lines. And I think that the barrier, though, is the fact that in almost everybody's head in America, therapy or counseling or talk therapy, whatever word we want to use to describe it, is reserved for those with a graduate degree. And I think that it's going to sound like heresy, and it's okay. I've said heretical things on this podcast before. It's my podcast. I get to say what I want. Damn it. But for people who hold these licenses that have gone through the hoops and paid their dues, quoting, and you can't see the air quotes that I'm putting up because it's audio, but they've paid their dues, sometimes in literal terms through actual money, and then other terms like the unpaid internships you mentioned, and just slugging it out with unpleasant work circumstances or whatever. Well, they get to the end, and then they get this handed down from on high blessing from the state to go practice, and then they get to bill insurance, and then they think that that's the only way. And I'm not saying everybody thinks like this, but there is a mentality that says this is the only way. And what we're starting to see now is an emergence of really cool things like community health workers, which are bachelor level holders. And we see peer support specialists, who are simply people who have endured a mental illness or a substance abuse addiction, and they have recovered, and now they're giving back, and these people are getting paid to go connect with, like you said, people like them, and create some camaraderie and build some rapport and distribute some healing. And for a little bit longer time, I don't know if this is true in all states, but many states that I know of have something called psychosocial rehabilitation and basic skills trainer workers who go into homes, and they work largely with youth, but they also work with the intellectual disability population, and they teach things like basic skills, like tying your shoes and putting food in your belly, but also social skills. And those are typically bachelor level workers who can absolutely bring healing to certain levels of community. But a lot of times, those very valuable services are poo-pooed by people in our profession of our stripe, because we're somehow afraid that there's not enough hurt to go around, and somehow we're going to be able to help everybody who needs it anyway, which is completely ludicrous. And so I think that's another obstacle too, is that the mentality that you can only receive the help that you need from this graduate degree, and then the subsequent internship and the thousands of hours and the license. And I would love to call shenanigans on that. I don't know where we're going to fund the people to bring that help unless they do it out of their own good free will and accord. Maybe you have some ideas.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, I think there is certainly like an elitist attitude within the therapy community. And, it's easy to fall into that, right? Because you have this idea of like, well, I did all this schooling and I did all this work, and, I'm like, why does somebody else get to call themselves, a mental health professional if they haven't done all the work that I have? I think it's easy to kind of fall into that. And, certainly we can make designations between different mental health professionals. We already do. I'm an LPC. I can't perform the duties of a psychiatrist.
Right.
That already exists. And I know that there are, lots of different kind of feuds in between all the different spaces in the mental health field as well. But yeah, I mean, and you're right. A lot of that becomes about like, well, how do we fund those programs, and how do we get those people into positions where they can help people? And so, I am well aware that there's not like an easy, immediate answer to any of this. But I think it's just something that we need to be thinking about and talking about, because if we truly want, people, and by that I mean all people, to be in a mentally healthy space, which is what I would really love, we have to make therapy accessible to people. And that's not just about making it cheap enough, that's about putting people in the room that have the ability to connect with people in different communities.
Right. What kind of success have you seen, or what kind of programs have you encountered that actually encourage broader diversity? And again, I want to hang a couple of shingles out here so that people are aware. Privilege is not a bad word. It's just a neutral observation of somebody who came from something that, elevated them, that maybe they didn't earn. Like, my parents earned my privilege, and I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm also not running from it and hiding in shame and, self-flagellating like I'm some subhuman now. No, it's just I need to acknowledge that, and I need to be very grateful for it, and not beat other people about the head and shoulders and be like, why aren't you where I am? So privilege is not a bad word, and diversity does not break along only gender and ethnic lines. There's economic diversity, there's diversity of thought, there's diversity of entertainment and enjoyment and hobby, and a lot of those, and diversity of religion and spiritual faith. So I guess I'm trying to figure out here is, how do we draw in people who are not of the traditional stripe in this profession? And for those of you who may not be aware, traditionally our profession started with a bunch of males who were in the psychiatry field, and then it branched to males who are non-psychiatry, psychology, master's level, and then females started coming in, and then it tilted much more toward female in the last probably 40 years. And that's who mostly dominates our field. I think it's probably a 3-to-1 ratio, if I remember correctly, female to male in our profession. And we have almost no ethnic minorities represented, and even fewer LGBT folks represented. And beyond that, it's really hard to discern who falls into categories of different demographic stripes, like the religion, the hobby, the socioeconomic stratification, like did you or did you not come from poverty or foster care, that kind of thing. It's really hard to discern that, because we're just not known for tacking up those kinds of self-identifiers on our Psychology Today website or whatever. It's usually, it asks, what do you specialize in treating? It doesn't say, what's your background and how can I identify with you? For that, they give us like 2 paragraphs.
Right. Yeah. No. And that's such an interesting point that you bring up, that we don't really announce that kind of stuff. And I think it comes from this weird space of maybe listing, for example, your race or your sexual orientation, or your gender identity on your website. People might perceive that as
an exclusion,
weird, inversely prejudicial thing.
Well, I think it comes from the, or at least from what I gather from my grad school, was that it comes from the old school veiled therapist. Turn around, sit on that couch, and you're not going to look at me, and you're not going to know anything about me. I'm going to know everything about you as a client, but you don't get to know anything about me. And then, Rogers came along and kind of turned that upside down, and now we've got a little bit more of personal self-disclosure, but I was taught that you self-disclose only to heighten rapport so that you don't risk making the session about you. But then we've got this different school of thought that says what you're alluding to, which is, well, if you put up on your website that you're a Christian, non-denominational Christian, for example, then you're automatically turning off everybody who is not a Christian. It's like, well, no, that's not true at all. If you hang up that you're openly gay male, then all of a sudden no straight people can come see you. It's like, no, that's not true either. But there's definitely a fear there that somehow we're inherently discriminatory by announcing what we're good at. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, and it is strange, and I understand where that perception comes from, because there may be people, if you announce that you're a gay male on your website, there may be people that say, oh, I don't want to go to that guy, and that's their stuff. That's right. Something they need to kind of reflect on. But I think that you're totally right. That really old school version of the therapist who is expressionless and emotionless and doesn't say anything about themselves and doesn't have any pictures of their family in their office.
But by the way, what Mel's talking about here does not happen anymore, and if it does, don't go to that person.
Yeah, that's icky.
If you're listening, you're like, I don't want to go to therapy because it sounds like Sigmund Freud on the couch and he's smoking in his office. No, that's not what we do anymore. So don't let that be a barrier.
Yeah, we're luckily moving a far away from that and starting to, I think, realize that there's so much richness in relational experiences and connection with people, and it's impossible to connect with somebody who is staring at you with no expression on their face and won't answer any personal questions about